Hey, Michael.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. So this is Techie Personal Finance Bootcamp. I have a special edition today because I'm going live for the first time with a guest. I have Michael Liendo with me today. And I met Michael online through Twitter, which is where I met a lot of people due to the COVID era, surprisingly. And so it's very fun following him. He shares a lot of awesome AWS related content as well as family related content. And so me being a family guy and being in the tech space and kind of seeing what everyone is doing and going on and who I should be having on the show, Michael stood out right away. And I'm looking forward to sharing his story with you guys today. Thanks for coming on the show today, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. It's a pleasure. And again, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so I think the first place it always makes sense to start out is like, what was your journey into tech?
Oh man, I have a rather unconventional pathway that got me here. So I went to college. I went to college actually to be a teacher. Early childhood education was my thing. But after a year and a half, uh, I didn't want to do it. It just wasn't my vibe.
So you
And
finished school and got to that point, and then you decided that, or throughout school, you kind of realized this wasn't going to be your path.
So after a year and a half in college, I ran track, and that was sort of my ticket in there.
That's
But I was like, I'm a man now, at the ripe age of 20,
for
and
sure.
I was like, I don't want to do this. So I just completely dropped out, stopped attending classes, flunked out of college essentially. And I remember being back home and my dad, he came in and he took a newspaper as I'm just kind of waking up at the dawn of 11 a.m.
Yep.
And he threw the newspaper at me. It was the classifieds, and he was like, "I don't care what you do, but you're gonna make something out of yourself." And fortunately, there was this gold rush known as the iPhone that had just come out around that time,
Nice.
and I was like, "I'm gonna be an iPhone developer." And I wish I could say that was that, but I realized that that's really hard.
Yep.
So after book after book, I'm completely self-taught, book
Wow.
after book, and then long nights of just studying after waiting tables. I just wanted something better for myself, and at that point, for my daughter. And I just sort of picked up programming along the way. My first job was as a data visualizer for a local newspaper.
Wow. So what was that time period where you found out that something like that existed and then you started self-studying? How long was that kind of time period where you're like picking up the book? And did you get distracted at all during that process? Did you end up taking like hiatuses, or
Yeah.
were you pretty consistent throughout that process?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't consistent at all. It was pretty much the hardest. Yet looking back, it was a great time. Way for me to do any of that stuff. So 2.5 years is the time frame that we're working with, and it's that realization that you have to give up uh, parties, you have to give up friends, and you realize who your real friends are at that point. And it's a sacrifice, but again, it was me trying to make something out of myself, and I to this day, I mean, 15 years later, I keep that image in my mind of like, you need to make something of yourself, and that was just pretty much my fuel. I gave it all up, and like I said, I went with Objective C, then Java, then Swift came out, and like, hear me out now. I wasn't learning any of them to actually ship anything. I was just learning basic programming concepts
Yep.
and like literally Googling like how to become a programmer, what is the best language, and like those infamous keywords.
Yeah. So yeah, when you don't have that guided stuff, like you just think this is what I would do in school, right? I'd find out definitions, I'd find out like this piece, and you add it up, and you might kind of make something of it, but it's a little bit more difficult, right? When you're actually trying to build real life things.
Yeah, it's night and day, right? It's the difference between learning in a classroom and being out in the real world. When it's just you and an empty web page, uh, leaning more towards onto like the front end side of things. When it's me and an empty web page and I'm just trying to envision something, you're sort of like playing Picasso and just bit by bit sculpting until you have something that looks decent.
That's awesome. So from the newspaper, what was kind of the next stage? Like, was the newspaper exciting because it was your first job, or was it what a lot of people would expect? Like, it's a newspaper.
It was Both. It
Okay.
was very much so a newspaper. Um, it's a difficult industry, and I think that's just the harsh reality is that it's very difficult for the newspaper industry right now. And they expected me to come in and be this team where I would just every article put something out so that the newspaper article that was in print needed a nice data visual, a map, some sort of animation,
Yeah.
something to draw the audience in online. But the tough part was that I had to do it, and the next day there was a whole new day. So you like, I became a master at sort of rapid prototyping, which was very, very tough. But I couldn't complain because the hardest thing about being a self-taught developer is getting that very first job.
Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
kept telling myself, give it 1 year. 1 year, the gates are going to open for you. And sure enough, that's what happened. After a year, I moved on to a consulting agency.
That's awesome. And that has to be like a good skill type, or just, I don't even know if you'd call it a skill, but being able to keep up with that new day, new
Yeah.
craziness, have to like build something completely from scratch, self-taught all along the way. So uh, did you have any community or reference points at that point where, like, if you were to get stuck on something in that first year, that you could go to and be like, hey, they're asking me to do this, I have no clue what the heck's going on, can you point me in the right direction here?
No, I didn't have anyone. And that's another trait that um, I would say that a lot of self-taught developers carry is that we are just masters at how to Google things and how to just sort of like it should be a class, right? Um, we're just really, really good at finding those solutions, whether it be Stack Overflow, some random buried blog post or whatnot, and applying those to our situations. The community did come, but it came much later. I would say about 8 months of me after me starting that position, and it was just a local meetup group. I'm actually still a part of the group today,
Awesome.
and yeah, it was just initially me attending, being afraid to talk to people,
Yep.
working up the courage to give my first presentation, and that was definitely a milestone in my career. Is when you make that breakthrough from learner to one giving back that knowledge, it really does propel you forward by leaps and bounds. And it's I just have to attest to like a personality trait of mine of just always just trying to find that next stepping stone.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's important, especially in tech. Like, it's important in life, but tech is constantly changing. Things are constantly moving. There's always new things that you have to be on the hunt for, and
Yeah, for
making,
better or worse.
yeah. So tell me, the thing that caught my eye is probably about 2 months ago now. You tweeted about like your family just doesn't really necessarily understand like why you would leave an pretty well-known company. So it's like a Fortune 100 company, right? Is where
Yeah.
you had worked. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to go and join this small kind of boutique firm or this boutique team. Like, what was the thought process behind that? Because I think a lot of people would share that. If you just said that to someone, they'd be like, well, why would you leave like such a massive company where
Yeah,
probably a lot of stability that comes with those larger companies?
exactly. I was giving up. I live in the Midwest. For those of you that are unfamiliar with my background, I'm in Iowa. So I was giving up a healthy six-figure salary. Which here, I mean, in San Francisco, maybe not the biggest deal, but here, like you're set with that. Um, Gave up the pension, all the benefits of like phone discounts and whatnot, but uh, it just wasn't for me. And this kind of goes back to this theme, this lifelong theme that I have, that I've realized over the course of time is I just sort of redefined my own happiness, and it was tough, but I knew that as secure as it is and as much legacy as that job carried, it just wasn't my personality trait, and it wasn't somewhere where I was going to be happy. The work wasn't any tougher than work you might find somewhere else. The colleagues, you have great colleagues for the most part.
Yep.
Uh, it just wasn't a good fit for me, and so I left.
And so did you leave and then I'll figure it out, or were you actively looking, found something and it's like, oh, this makes sense. I knew this wasn't a fit. This is something 100% different probably in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. And was that kind of the case, or did you just kind of make a leap of faith that you'd find something that was going to be a good fit?
Fortunately, because of the network that I have on Twitter, similar to how you and I came to find one another, I've had employers reach out to me, and we just keep touch. We met at conferences back when, who can remember when we could go to conferences and
Yep.
stuff and meet in person. But you have your friends and your contacts, and I didn't want to make it public. I just threw out a couple feelers to 3 companies, and I just said, hey, I'm browsing, and they said, yeah, come on whenever you're ready. And fortunately, it worked out where I landed where I am today, which is over at EchoBind.
Awesome. Well, congrats, because I know that even when it's not like a good fit, it's still changes uncomfortable a lot of times. And that's good promotion there. And so, yeah, you've talked about kind of redefining what it means to kind of be happy, and like,
Yeah.
what does that mean to you, and kind of the messages that you kind of share with your children? Because I know they're still pretty young at this point, right? So pretty impressionable.
Yeah. So I have 3. I have Sophia, she's 9. Noah is 7, and then Xavier, he runs the house. He's 3. Um, and it ties it all together really, because I have sort of the parents who taught me, my dad actually, really,
Wow.
who taught me, and he's very blue collar, and he's a man's man, and the pathway was set. I'm named after him, so there was this sort of inherent legacy that I was supposed to take on. But he wanted me to play football, and I ran cross country, and he wanted me to play basketball, and I chose swimming. It was, I'm still taking on sports. I'm still being successful, but I always had that mindset of doing it my own way. And I didn't want my kids to feel like I was ever sort of imposing my view sets on them. I never wanted them to sort of follow in my footsteps to the extent where they had to do what I do. Uh, Rather, I would just hope that they carried on this sort of legacy of, as long as I'm happy and as long as I'm able to take care of myself, then hopefully I can get to a point where I can also take care of others. And I would see that as a win as a parent.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest fear, right? Is like giving your children enough space to be their own people, make sure they're safe, make sure they don't make huge mistakes and stuff like that. But it's hard, and the best thing you can do is kind of show them by your own actions.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks tremendous, and that's probably exactly what you got from your dad too, right? Like, he was a man's man, so he just was doing things, and you were seeing it. Plus, he was reinforcing it every now and then, like when you needed it, like that newspaper hit.
Yeah. It's one of the things they don't teach you in parenting school is that balance that we need to find between follow in my footsteps because I've made these mistakes before versus you need to touch the stove to make sure that it's hot on your own. And it's every child is different, but you're right. That's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, they all have their own personalities. Like they'll, I know that's how I was. Like, I didn't like being told anything. I would always listen, but I'm like, I need to figure this out. And
Yep.
yeah, I was like the same way. So I know you're part of a AOS or AWS community. Tell me a little bit more about like your role and what that means, because I don't think I've seen that role specifically in a lot of people I interact with.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes sense because it's relatively new. We've been around, we were in beta over the summer and we just launched to the public. I was fortunate enough to be part of that beta program and help provide some influence on what it is today. But we're essentially just a group of open source community builders who are just passionate about AWS. You can sort of, I might get in trouble for this, but it's kind of like free DevRel. Like we're a group of people who are just really passionate. We provide content to teach others about AWS services, and there's different sections of it. So I'm part of the front end / serverless section. So you'll find me largely on Twitter and on YouTube. Check out my YouTube channel. Feel free to like and subscribe.
Yeah. Do you have like a handle for that, or I'll hunt it down and add in the show notes later?
Yeah, definitely. You can go ahead and throw it in the show notes, and then I'll just paste it in the chat. But that's a total self plug though. So
No, yeah, that's I want you on the show because I think everything you share, and like you mentioned, it's free, right? So it's free resources. Yeah. You're always providing various kinds of content, very diversified content. So yeah, don't worry about any of that. Obviously, you're not going to be hunting down people and be like, oh, you need to be liking and subscribe and stuff like that. Yeah, no big deal there. Yeah, and so you also do some courses for Egghead, right?
I have a intro course up. I'm going to be providing more blog and video content for Egghead.
Sweet.
So nothing currently visible, but it's just all sort of in the works. And the nice thing is that it ties in together. So as an AWS community builder, I build AWS content. Why not go ahead and make that Egghead content as well?
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
And so you even mentioned like early on with the meetups and things like that, like working up your confidence to be like, I can actually present. I think it helps for growth, right? To probably have that imposter syndrome, probably not be 100% sure that you're ready to present, but
Yep.
putting your name in the hat, signing up, because you'll actually level up so much faster. You'll want to make sure that you don't like fall flat on stage or on video, however you're
Exactly.
presenting and stuff. So have you found that that teaching aspect has been valuable for you in your career?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the fastest way to learn something. Those of us within conference circles, we call it TDD. A lot of people know it as sort of test-driven development, but we say that it's talk-driven development, where you sign up for a talk, you say, "This is what I'm going to present," and you're not exactly 100% sure on how you're going to do it. So now you're researching and studying, and you're just rapid learning to
Yeah.
be able to deliver a great presentation. And I would say it's very much of the same case, whether I'm creating a video or a blog post or anything else.
Yeah. And so content creation too, right? It's a form of education. It's something that probably a lot of more people are kind of directing themselves to. And because of COVID and stuff, they're like, oh yeah, I might
Right.
as well write something to kind of pass the time, or I might as well go live video or whatever it is. But in your eyes, what has been like the biggest challenges you face with creating content and like having the confidence to push the publish button?
Oh man, so many. I don't have it down to a science by
Yeah.
any means. One biggest issue is that I need to constantly remind myself, like, hey, you have this idea, you have all the content in your mind. I just need to realize, sort of talk myself into the fact that I don't need to go ahead and knock it out in this 6 hour period. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. I can take a break and come back to it in a day or two. That's huge because typically I'll find myself holding off on content. I have a Notion board full of ideas, but it's hard for me to get to it just because I'm just like, well, I got to devote a whole day to it. And it's like, no, you don't. Do bits and pieces,
Yeah.
or we have this idea of a oh geez, Joel J Hooks. He is,
Cool.
what does he call it? It's, what is it where you have like the plant?
Garden,
Yeah, digital
garden,
garden.
digital garden. Yep.
Yeah, there's the idea of a digital garden, which is like, hey, here's the idea. Here's what I'm building. It's a garden. I'm gonna water it. I'm gonna come back, and it's gonna grow into the full project someday.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah, and you'll be planting different stuff, right?
yeah,
Like different, it might not seem like it's all makes sense, but like if you stand back over time, and you're gonna be like, oh, this is awesome.
exactly. And people take a lot of respect to that because you're putting content out there. You're putting yourself out there first and foremost, and you make it so that it's not so so unicorn,
Yep.
where it's like I'm this magical person who can just push out content. It's like, no, I push out half-ass ideas all the time, and I'll just come back and I'll just water it.
Yep. Yeah. You can, most of these things you can edit pretty easily. Um, I think my biggest thing, I do all different forms of content. So I have the
Hmm.
video, I do the podcast, I do strategy guides, cheat sheets. Who knows what else I think of and just kind of push out. And like basically, I get fried on stuff. Like I'm like,
Yeah,
like I've done so many interviews. I think I'm done doing that for a while. And then like my mind and energy levels shift to somewhere else, and then I'm able to focus on that. So I guess it's kind of like a digital garden in that aspect, and it's kind of navigating my levels of like what's exciting, what I'm enjoying,
right.
and it's cool. Like once you start to flex some of these different muscles, as you can just bounce around between them. And I know that you do all those different types of content too. So I'm sure it's kind of refreshing when you get to come back to some of these things, be a guest on a podcast, present a talk, and different things like that.
Yeah, I love just to pay it forward. Honestly, I had folks that I really aspired to that really helped me out, whether they know it or not. You know,
Yeah.
all the blog articles and videos on YouTube that I watch, I want to help bring somebody else up. So whoever is like me, hopefully I can be that person that they're latching on to get to where I am today.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of things I still kind of want to dive into with you. So
Yeah.
even the early on being self-taught, like what was the biggest challenge? What you said it was your kind of father and your child. It was one child at this time, right? When you first dove into stuff, like
Yeah, my oldest, yep.
what made you kind of power through, even though you had no clue what you were doing? Like,
uh oh man. I would just say determination. I could just pick an emotion and find a reason that that was guiding me through. I mean, anger at the fact that, uh, I felt like I was letting down an entire generation. I mean, I'm the oldest of 14, and it's just like yeah, I know, right? I have all these siblings. I'm not oldest. I'm sorry. I have two older sisters that are gonna be yelling at me now, but oldest male.
yeah,
Uh, and but I mean, it's just you have that weight on your shoulders, and it's just that anger that you're letting everybody down. Sadness that I let my dad down. I mean, he put actual money into my college.
yeah,
Happiness so that I can one day just be that person that my daughter aspires to be. It's an emotional roller coaster. It's tiring. And again, it's lonely, and it's very real. It's very raw, and you just have to be honest with yourself of, is this something I want to do? And that thing is just be successful for generations, or be successful for the next generation.
mhm.
It's tough.
Yeah. What types of wins were you holding on to, like while you were kind of self-taught? Was there like certain milestones? Because like that's
Yeah.
the only way I could kind of imagine something like that. Like you're just waiting in like an open ocean. You're like, I don't know where the heck the land is. Like I'm gonna get there probably, but like, do you see like little islands? You're like, you see birds flying? Like, oh, there must be land nearby. Like,
Oh,
how are you navigating that?
yeah, I could a couple things stick out, and I know they stick out because, like I said, it's been a while now. But hitting run in Xcode and having like my app show up, and I remember, even though I was just following a tutorial, I was like, I wrote this code. Granted, it was from somebody else, but it was like, I wrote this code.
Yep,
I ran it, and oh my goodness, it's right here in front of me. It's tangible. And as a software developer, uh, so many times we were writing stuff digitally, and it was like, I'm holding my phone in my hand of something that I built.
that's awesome.
Yeah, going back to even just the wordplay. Right now, I said as a software developer, and too many times I would say on Twitter, I see profiles that say I'm a aspiring
Yep.
coder. I'm an aspiring developer. I was like, no, 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 no. You wrote code. Like, that's the only qualification. And making that mental shift was another milestone of, no longer am I going to call myself aspiring or soon to be or want to be. Getting rid of all of that jargon and just saying I'm a developer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was both educational as far as the skills that I needed to know, but then also that mental flip of, this is now the person that I'm going to be.
Yeah. So what do the kind of challenges that lie ahead? Kind of what are the things that are challenging you right now? Like what are you stuck on? What's the things that you're like, man, and it could have been something you just solved like yesterday or a week ago, but like what's been these things now that you're into your career that still drive you nuts? And I think that helps people recognize like everyone has challenges at different points, and you're
Yeah.
probably going to run into imposter syndrome. I think the best thing you can do is figure out how to eliminate that so it's not an obstacle for you. But I
Yeah.
think most people still kind of run into that because things are constantly changing. You're always constantly learning. There's new technology, and yeah, AWS is just new in general over the last handful of years. So it's like there's always new things coming out.
Yeah, definitely. I get stuck on daily, say hourly. Uh, the latest thing would be today. Today at EchoBind, I'm working in a project where the front end is React Native, so I'm building a mobile app,
Okay.
and it's cool. Like, I'm comfortable in that stuff, but the back end is built in Ruby, and I have zero context in Ruby. And I've been fairly like open about this on Twitter. Is I was like, I don't understand it. There's just small little tweaks, but I don't even know where to begin.
Sure.
And I'm very much so back into that junior mindset. Now, imposter syndrome comes in because according to my title, my code may say something else, but according to my title, I'm a senior engineer.
Yep.
Uh, but I had to be very honest with myself is that I needed help. And if anything, that's probably the biggest difference between a so-called engineer or developer and a senior developer is just that moment where you're just like, I need help. I need to ask somebody and not being afraid to gab that.
Yeah.
Um,
Because you can
but oh,
learn
go ahead.
pretty easily, right? By trying to like, I'm afraid to ask someone because I'll look like I'm not a senior developer. I'll look like I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, you can waste hours. You can waste a lot of mental energy when it's as simple as asking someone that's their specialty. And
Yeah,
just in life, like that's why people exist. That's why communities exist. We all have different strengths, weaknesses. We all need to rely on somebody else other than ourselves. Like I didn't grow this food. I didn't build these machines in my house
right.
like that. And so I think sometimes people get too focused on like, nope, I need to figure this out. I need to do it myself. I need to do it my way or whatever, like 100%. But like that's just not how the world's meant to operate. So once we get over that, then it should be a lot easier to accept like, hey, this is a weakness, but I can grow in it and I can lean on people too because there's things that they'll lean on you for.
Exactly. I'm here where I am today, and I would consider myself rather successful in the industry. Um, I was able to get here as a self-taught developer because I learned very quickly that I just need to stand on the shoulders of giants. Nobody's reinventing too much of anything these days. The code is already built. If anything, we're just tweaking it to fit our situations. Um, just stand on those shoulders. It gets you a lot further if you can put that humility aside of, like you said, trying to make every single thing and answer everything on your own.
Well, and a huge benefit of that too is like those people actually get a lot of kicks from just like how you enjoy doing the different education aspects, being a mentor, being at the workshops and things like that, where like you get some joy out of doing that. And so you're providing them that dopamine hit of like, oh, I get to swoop in and help somebody that makes them feel good. So I think that's
Mhm.
another thing too is like what we think that they're going to be thinking about us is like totally opposite. They're going to be more happy. It's going to make their day better.
Yeah.
And like obviously you don't want to jack their whole day, but just be smart about when you need to tap into them for those things. Uh, Community is such a crucial aspect just in general for people's careers, but especially with COVID and all the
Yeah.
social distancing, remote work. Like, can you kind of describe like what community means to you and how you've been able to use it to your benefit, but also to be able to benefit others as well?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I would say that during the whole COVID situation, I've had to redefine what community did mean to me because in the past, I thought that it was going out places
Yep.
and being able to say like, oh, this conference is always going to be superior because of the people that I can meet in person. Now, I actually still feel pretty strongly about that, but if it's not a possibility, then I have to change my thinking. So community is simply those that you are able to reach out to, but also have that open channel where they feel comfortable reaching out to you. So it's going back to your point where I might be stuck on something, but if I don't make an open door for somebody to assist me, and if I come off as a know-it-all, then nobody's gonna want to help me. It's like,
Yep.
forget that guy. Um, so you're right. It's not just pushing out the content, but I make mistakes in my content. I have errors in my syntax, and it's making it so that I've seen posts, unfortunately, where someone will issue a correction on it, and the author is, you don't know what you're talking about, or um, there's a wrong way of doing that, or the wording itself is just a little bit off. It's very, very important for me to have open channels of communication, and that during this COVID time period is really the essence of communication or a community to me.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned communication, and that's super critical, like not only just in work, but things can be taken very differently when it's plain text like that. And so, yeah,
especially when it's 280 characters on Twitter.
Yeah, well, especially there, and things sometimes people get a rise out of that too. So like sometimes they're doing it on purpose, but like within the internal code base and the comments and kind of interacting with other people, like that is very much something where it's like you guys are on the same team.
Yeah,
you're trying to get the same outcome, and so most likely they don't mean something negative, but at the same time they may be. Like it just depends on those types of people, and those are the people that get weeded out of companies. Those are people that have a hard time finding their next opportunity, because when something like COVID hits, unemployment hits, or anything like that, they're like, "Hey, I'm unemployed," and people are like, "Well, yeah, sorry, I think we're kind of fully stocked here." But for those people that people can relate to and like want to hang out with, have been helped or enjoyed helping, they're going to be the first ones to, like, if you like, oh, Michael's unemployed or whatever, they'll raise their hands, be like, we'll find something. Let's get you in the loop. Let's start a conversation. There might not be a role yet, but maybe by the time you have a conversation, something might open up. And so like it's relationships and being likable. And I think that's a huge difference between tech today and tech 20, 30 years ago. Is like people used to be able to work in their own silos. Like, oh, yep, that guy knows everything. And so he's good, leave him alone. He's a little grumpy or whatever. That just doesn't fly with how quickly things are moving and how teams are being built these days. So it's super crucial.
I will always stand that the hardest thing about programming is just the people. It's just all about communication. We work in teams. It's hard to build a great product on your own. Not saying it can't be done, but as soon as you introduce more than yourself to a project, that should become the focus, is how to have that engagement.
Awesome. Yep. So what's something that you look forward to for 2021? Since we're probably gonna get this out before the end of 2020 for the podcast episode. We're live right now. Like, what's something cool that you're excited for 2021 to occur for you?
The end of 2020. So we can just put this year behind us. Hopefully, like I said, by the time that this airs, we have a vaccine out. People are getting healthy.
Yep.
It can sort of put an ease on some of the restrictions that I know a lot of people are hurting with, whether it's their business or just their mental state. I think that would be my biggest focus. And again, I'm not even impacted by it all that much. I very much so love being by myself. But it's not good as a community or as a country or as a world. So having the ability to just be out and socialize again like we used to, and hold the ones that we love.
Yeah, but I think me and you are lucky to where we can navigate these times a little bit better. But even me being a natural introvert, like I still miss a lot of those things. You mentioned conferences and how it was to go to those things. So yeah, just imagine how it is for people that like that's where they thrived, that they're used to all that in person and kind of tactile, being able to hug, like high five, whatever it was that people do, drink, go out, have fun, frisbee golf, whatever it be. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, if you had one tip to give yourself let's say when your dad was hitting you with that newspaper, what would you say to kind of make life either easier mentally for yourself or just easier career transition wise?
I would say, in that moment, because that was a real pivotal moment. I would say, tell your dad that he's still proud of you. I would say that would be something that I would tell myself, is make sure that he knows that, because oftentimes as parents, we have to issue that tough love. And I know now from these 3 crazy kids that I have, is as a parent, you become a little subconscious of, am I being too hard on him, or is this truly the best? But I would say, let your dad know that you realize that you're still proud of him, and you know that he's proud of you.
Yeah. I think that would be helpful for a lot of guys.
On a deep note,
because I think that's something where like parents struggle like so much, and you don't really appreciate it until you become one yourself. Like you just have no clue how chaotic it is trying to like navigate that arbitrary perfect way of raising someone, and then three different ones in your case, same here, where they all have different 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 ages, different timelines, different personalities, and things that set them off or things that they enjoy and stuff. So yeah, I think that is huge, and remind yourself of that too.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show today, Michael. It was a lot of fun. I'm going to make sure that we get all of your links to everything in the show notes once the podcast gets posted. And yeah, if anyone had any questions, I know Oscar was here kind of commenting on a few things. Googling 101 really should be a thing. He said that's amazing somewhere in there. I don't know at what point we were talking about that, but then talk-driven development, he says that he loves that. So any questions that want to come in as we wrap up today's interview? Let's see if anything pops in. Oh, and I got your YouTube I can share. I'm going to share Michael's YouTube channel for anyone that's still plugged in and wants to check that out. And yeah, subscribing, checking those things out. It's just one way to kind of level up. And even if that what Michael focuses on in AWS or any other thing that he's interested in and talking about isn't your specialty, it's always fun to kind of get that exposure and kind of see what else is out there, what other people enjoy and what they're working on. So then, yeah, when you do run into someone that is in that space or is interested in that space, that's what I really enjoy about community. It's not necessarily what I can do for Michael or what Michael can do for me, but who I can connect to Michael down the road, who Michael might be able to connect to me, who I can add value to. So it's like, it's not like a one-to-one. It truly is like that network spider web type thing where like just by knowing each other, we're improving other people's lives in our network. And
definitely
we have those kind of go-to. So Oscar does have a question. She says, as someone who gets stuck in the weeds, sometimes with developing, what's your trigger to know that you need to take a break? I think that's important right now, right?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the question. It's tough because there's been many moments where I've let it go too far. And I don't have a solution regarding the time frame, because there's been moments where I've had to wait and just ponder something at my desk for too long, but the answer finally came to me. But at the same time, there's been many moments where I said, you know what, 5 minutes, I've been doing this, my mind isn't in the game, I'm going to step away. And we've all had those moments where you walk away, and as soon as you leave the desk, your brain kicks in and it's like, I know how to solve that. So I would say if you are deciding, so it sounds like you're at that point where you're deciding, should I step away or not? Step away. And just let it go. It's just good to just sort of jumpstart your brain, let it relax for a little bit, and come back to it strong.
Yeah, and just from my aspect, obviously I don't do coding or developing it with what I do, but yeah, a lot of the same thing. Like your intuition is telling you to kind of check in with that. And I think it's probably something you just develop and get better at over time. I know, Oscar, for you specifically, you're still relatively early in your career, so it's probably going to be trickier to kind of find out those points and actually hear like that noise of you second guessing this actually is yourself saying take a break. But over time, you'll kind of start to fine tune those things, waste a lot less time, I imagine, just because of you get to know yourself better, you get to know your skill level and how your brain just kind of functions and triggers and kind of jumps off, I imagine. Just for me in any aspect of my life, that's just, I've gotten better with the more I do stuff to a better understanding of how I operate, basically. So yeah,
definitely.
That's awesome. Any other questions before we jump off today? Got some cool background colors there, Michael. It makes it
thanks.
a lot more lively. Awesome.
It's kind of my thing. I have a blog post on where you can buy these lights and how to program them to change their own colors. So
oh, nice.
Yeah. I tried whatever I learn. If it has an API, I'm probably going to write a post about it. So.
Yeah. So, and this probably is more like security type person, but I have like the Philip Hue lights. Yeah. It does that. Like, I know when those things first came out, and it might still be a situation like security risk. Is that something that's a big deal to be concerned about these things? Is that something that you'd have expertise, or is that more of like a security type person for that?
anything on the web is going to be vulnerable to an extent, but for the most part, Philips Hue, it's down to the provider level. Philips Hue is a great choice. I use LifeX. They have great protocols in place. It's really just going to be when you start wiring things up yourselves. If you're doing more IoT instead of off the shelf stuff, then security becomes a factor.
Yeah.
But when you're working with hubs, it's already configured and you're pretty secure.
Okay, cool. So yeah, just make sure you do the updates and things like that, and it should be golden.
Exactly.
Perfect. So I have a question come in here. I'm not sure what it pertains to, but it says, what question did you have to answer to have that confidence and understanding of yourself to make that bold move? Maybe they're talking about being able to use like APIs and things like that, maybe?
Maybe. If can you give some clarity on that question? But I would say they might be referring to like the meetup stuff, like going to meetups, or any. I can just answer generally, like to make a bold move. What do I do?
Yep.
I think about who is this going to impact. Selfishly, I think about how can this impact me, and from there I just sort of weigh the costs. Is this going to take time? Is this move going to take money? And from there, you sort of have your variables in place. Like, this is going to help so many people, and it also betters me. There's a win-win. Sometimes you get into a situation, I don't have the time, and it's really not going to better me, but at the same time, it's going to help out a lot of other people.
Yep.
And then now you're just sort of in this place where you're like, am I going to do this or not? But for the most part, if you have the time, if it's going to help you, because nothing's better than being stuck and searching for a solution, and it's your own blog post.
Yeah. So they did provide some clarity too on that. So they were talking about specifically early on in the interview as far as walking away from the Fortune 100 company. So understanding that it wasn't for you, like what gave you the confidence to know yourself well enough? Like, hey, it's not me, it's the company. I guess it's kind of where the question is.
That's that flips it a little bit. That was a really tough decision because there was a lot of security that went with that, and a lot of as I mentioned with my dad, there's a certain amount of legacy there, and so a lot of underlying principle. So I don't know if it was as much. I didn't really see it as a bold move. I saw it just more as I'm doing what is making me happy. And that has always been my principle. So I never really see it as being bold or taking a leap of faith. It was just, I'm gonna do this. Now that's a privileged statement because not everybody's in a position where you can just always do what makes you happy.
Yeah.
But to help in that, you have a little bit in savings, you have a good support system in case things were to go awry. So if you're not in that situation, then make sure that you have your ducks in a row so that you can make those choices. So for me, it wasn't as much bold as it was just feeling it out and taking the right steps.
Yeah, and you've mentioned too that Redefining Happiness, that's the name that we're going to be using too for your episode when I post it. And so they said, thanks, that's an awesome answer, they said. And I agree. I think that redefining happiness means that you're constantly checking in with yourself, right? You're constantly checking in like, hey, like what's going on? How do I feel about this thing? Probably on a regular basis, maybe more than most people do.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you're constantly redefining it. But since you're constantly checking in with yourself, that helps you just have the clarity like, oh, not happy here. This sounds like at least it would be more in that direction and make that a higher probability. And so that's something that's important even for the people I work with when it comes to like financial planning is like, well, first let's talk about what's important to you. What's the things you like? What's the things you want to do? Because so many people are just flailing around doing everything because of everyone else around them, because they think that they need to do these things to support the way people think about them, or so that their parents will be proud of them, so their spouse or siblings or whatever. So I think sometimes we have an identity crisis because we never stop to think like, what is happiness to me? And you've mentioned it multiple times in this, that you're constantly thinking about that. And if you realize that your thoughts or views have changed, then you just redefine happiness and you're fine with it. And now you're going to move in that direction. So I think part of that is just checking in with yourself, right?
Exactly. And there's a lot of techniques that individuals use. I mean, there's journey mapping where this is where I want to be, and then you work back to how you want to get there. There's vision boards. Some people use vision boards where you have all the pictures up on a cork board and you say, I'm going to aspire to do this by whenever. But it's, yeah, the main thing is doing those check-ins and keeping it fresh in your mind, because that's really what's going to motivate you.
Yeah, yep, provides clarity, right? Like both of those things, you're defining it, and you can change those things, right? And I'm sure, how many times do you think that you've redefined happiness over the course of
Oh man.
focus on your adult life?
Oh, it's too many, too many. Because and I want to be conscious of time, but just to answer that though, I am of that mindset where I want my kids to find their own happiness, and I don't want to instill that you have to follow my shoes just because that's what makes me happy.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of things in my life where I've been chairman of our local civil rights commission. So I was appointed public office. I was a professional model during my serving days. So I traveled the country, modeling and acting, and it was always like, this could be my career. No, this could be my career. And I can't, for me, I mean, personally, I can't have my kids think that they can be whatever they want to be in life if I never tried to be whatever I wanted to be.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to you, like you said, those aren't necessarily bold moves. It's like you trying to move the way that you think is going to provide you the most happiness. And
Yeah,
that's important to know. You can pivot. There's so many people that get so far into their career, so far into college, and they're like, oh, have to stick it out, have to do it, have to keep on this path for all these arbitrary reasons. But like, no, like that's at least a point to stop and think a little bit more in depth about this stuff, and maybe you assess it. Maybe it's something else going on, and it's not these things, but it's at least a reason to pause and kind of see what's going on, and know that no matter your direction, you can change these things. And
exactly.
if you're pursuing it for the right reasons, I think you should be happy and excited about those different possibilities.
Definitely. I believe it's called sunk cost fallacy, right?
Yep, for sure.
The amount of time that you've been doing something isn't an indication of whether or not you should continue doing that thing.
Yep, it's irrelevant, right? Like,
Yeah.
you've already made those decisions. It doesn't have the impact or control over like what you need to do. Yep, that's exactly what it's called. Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show live with me. It was super brave of you, and I hope you had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun asking you questions.
Oh no, this was great. Again, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for the questions from the audience. And again, it's been an awesome experience.
Awesome, Michael. Well, you have a great night. Thanks again for coming on, and I can't wait to share this a little bit more broadly than with our live audience and from tonight.
Awesome. Well, everybody stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.
Yep. Finish out 2020 strong, people. Take care.